Okay, good morning. Today we are doing Mem Ches Amud Beis. We are starting Mem Ches Amud Aleph at the two dots. So the Gemara says, that's the first two dots on the page. The Gemara says that Amar Rav Yehuda, the Rei de Rav Shmuel Bar Shelat, another mimer from Rav Yehuda, the son of Rav Shmuel Bar Shelat, in the name of Rav. What's the halacha? Tisha Achlu Dagam Echad Achlu Yerek. Mitzdarfen. If you have nine people, right, you have a situation. I didn't watch. Right, this is that Gemara. You have nine people. They ate regular, but one person did not. He only had a vegetable. So it's the halacha, and he's able to mitzdarf. Went to the zimun, so you could say alekenu or not. So we're quoting a mime in the name of Rav that if nine people ate dagam, meaning nine people ate regular, they washed, they had a normal meal. But be'echad achal yerek, and one person had a vegetable he didn't wash, so that person, that 10th person, has been starved, and he's still nevertheless able to join together in the zimun. Amar of Zera. So Rav Zera says, Bo minei Rav Yehuda. Rav Zera says about himself, I asked Rav Yehuda, Shemaina Mahu, Shiva Mahu. I asked him, okay, what about if you had 8 people who ate normal, 2 people who just had a yarak? Are that 2 people able to starve and able to now have What about 7? We had 3 people who didn't wash. Like, at what point do we say that, okay, you can't say Elikenu anymore? People who didn't wash cannot join, it's not sufficient. So, right, is it similar, right? Everybody knows by davening, right? You have to have 6 people who are davening, right? Is it similar to that? So what does the Gemara say? The Gemara says, Reb Zera asked Rabbi Yehuda. What did Rabbi Yehuda respond? Amar le loishna. Rabbi Yehuda responded back and said, there's no difference between 8 and 7 and 9. It's all the same. It's all the same. The halacha is that so long as you have 7, 8, or 9 people who ate regular, and the other ones who just ate yirakais, that they're able to be mitzdarf. Says the Gemara, Shisha vaday loimin boyali. That Reb Zera seems to have said that he asked him about 8 and 7. He told him, 8 and 7 doesn't make a difference. It's the same halacha. But Shisha vaday loimin boyali. According to this reading, that means that Reb Zera is saying, but 6, I for sure didn't ask him about. In other words, I thought for sure by 6 that it would not be okay to have just 6 people alone who washed, and then have 4 people who ate Iraqis and stuff. I didn't think that was going to work, so I didn't ask him that. Shisha vaday loimin boyali. 6 people was too little, and I for sure didn't ask him about that one. So I'm Rav Yirmiyah Shaper Avadat Lo Yiboilach. So Rav Yirmiyah thinks that what it means is because of the fact that he's saying, I think you're right, that you didn't ask him. Why not? Because of the fact that he thought the opposite of what Reb Zera thought. In other words, Reb Zera thought that at 6, it for sure is not worth it to ask because it's not enough. It's not enough people. It's not like by davening we say 6 people is not. No, it's not enough for a zimun of 10 to say Alikeno if you only had 6 people who washed and 4 people who didn't. That's what Reb Zera thought. Now Rabbi Yirmiyah responded to him. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, it's good that you didn't ask him about 6 because it's like kind of a dumb question. You already asked him about 8 and 7. You got the idea. The idea is that as long as you have like a majority of people that washed, they can bench, even if other people have been with styrofoam because they ate Jiraka. So obviously, what's the difference between 6 and 7, 8, 9, 10? They're all the same. So I'm like, it's good that you didn't ask him because because what's the reason why we allow you to have the people who did not wash and nevertheless ate Jirakas to be mitzdaref is because you have a Rav who washed. So too, you have a Rav who washed when you have 6. Obviously, you don't ask him about 5, but you already asked him about 8 and 9 and 7. So you got the principle. The principle is clear. If as long as you have a majority that washed, anyone who did not wash is able to be starved as long as they ate something. That is the principle. It doesn't make a difference if it's 6 or 9. That's all pasha. However, Rabbi Zera didn't understand that way. Rabbi Zera disagreed. Rabbi Zera said, I understand by 7, 8, 9, but not by 6. 6 is different. Why? So the Gemara says, V'iyu sava ruba de minkar ba'inan. Rabbi Zera held that you need a ruba de minkar. Since it would not be so obvious that most people had washed if you only have 6, so he thought that 6 it's not susceptible to having a zimun if 4 people only ate Yerakas. But 7, 8, 9, there he understood that that was the distinction. Whereas Rabbi Yirmiyah said it's a principle. It's a question of did you have a majority of people that washed, the majority that washed, then the others can starve to say Lekenu. If the majority did not wash, of course everyone agrees. But the question is on that interstitial space of number 6, is that going to be sufficient in order to still be mitzvah 4 people or not? According to Rabbi it's not enough. According to Rabbi Yirmiyah, it's enough. That is on one level of understanding this Gemara. However, there is another way to understand this Gemara. So if we look at Rashi for a second, Rashi tells us V'iyu Sava. Rashi says that he held who? Rav Zera, Shaykovel Mischar al Shaloi Shal al Ashisha. The Rav Zera who felt very bad. He was Kovel Mischaret al Shaloi Shal al Ashisha. He was very upset. They didn't ask about the 6. Now, did you see that Rav Zera was very upset they didn't ask about the 6? Did we say that anywhere in the Gemara? No. Look at the Bach. Look at the Gersa of the Bach. And Rashi, he has a line here. It says, Nichla Machida Nir Shahaya Garis Begamara Shisha Vai Loikam Ibayale, right? That he, instead of saying Vadai, he has a different Gersa, that he was Nabach. It didn't say Vadai. So let's reread the Gemara now. So he asked them about 7 and 8. So he said, no, 7 and 8 is fine. You can starve 2 or 3 people who didn't wash. Shisha, now if we reread the Gemara with the gears of the Bach to try to make sense of what Rashi means, that he was very upset. They didn't ask him about it. Shisha v'ayloi kamabayli. Why didn't they ask him about 6? So Amar Zera, I'm sorry, Amar Yirmiyah. So Yirmiyah says, what do you mean? It's good you didn't ask him about 6. Bullshit. By 6, it's a majority. You still have a majority, so you should be able to start 4 people. And the Gemara concludes, remember, what did Reb Zera say? Reb Zera felt maybe you need a Ruba de Minkar. Maybe you need to have a real majority of people that clearly washed. And 6 is not so clear. 7 is already more clear. So that would be the way to change the gear. So the Bach changes it to sort of make sense of how Rashi's saying. Otherwise, how would Rashi know that Reb Zera felt very bad? That he's being mischaret, it's kovel, right? He's very, very upset. Kovel, kovel lenu perushim, right? There's a line in Gemara. So that's perhaps how to make that make sense. If you look on the side of the Gemara in my Ein Mishpat, so it has a different approach to explain this line, and it says that Vadai becomes a Rashi Tevis. Tevis Vadai who Rashi Tevis. Vidalad Achlu Yerek. Vadai is a Rashi Tevis for 4, right? Vidalad Achlu Yerek. So now how do you read the Gemara? So now you read the Gemara, Shisha, right? In the case now, if you have 6 people, Vidalad Achlu Yerakos, right? And 4 people are eating vegetables, and those they didn't wash. So Loimi that I didn't ask him about. Why didn't I ask him about it again? I didn't ask him about it because I was sure, or relatively sure, as he says, he's a suffix of maybe he needs Ruba de Minka, and you're not going to have it over here. Is that clear? So now we have basically 3 ways to read this line of Vada. Either Vada, Vai, or Vidalat Achli Yerakos. Good? I should just mention that this reminds us of the Gemara on Chavim Beis. You remember the Gemara there was talking about a situation of Lovewood, what's considered attached to the ground. Remember the Gemara was Chafayim Beis, I think? Right? The Gemara told us at the bottom there in the page. The Gemara said, Shitali the Kalavadami Shloisha Arba Chamisha Shisha Shiva Shman Tisha Ma'u. Right. By 10 I for sure. And Shloisha is for sure connected. And 10 is for sure a separate Makkah. The question was, what about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9? So a similar kind of a situation. Okay? All right. Finish the Gemara. Now we get into something a lot of fun. Yeah? You ready? The Gemara says, Yane Malka Malka Sakri Charifta Bahadi Adadi. Yane and his wife. Who is his wife? Yanai's wife, Shlemtzin Amalka, right? The Gemara says she's a very special queen, right? When Yanai was gone, she took over, and it was such a wonderful experience for the times of the Jewish people. It used to rain on Friday nights, beautiful. And her brother was who? Shimon ben Shetach. Okay, that's the background needed for this Gemara. So Yanai Amal, but you need a little bit more of a background. So we'll tell you like this: the Gemara's background. The Gemara says Kedushin Samach. The Gemara says a Maisa about Yanai Amalek, that what happened, Yanai Melech went and conquered a whole bunch of cities. He was very successful in the war, and he came back. And he was, being, he was wearing the clothing of the Kohen Gadol. Mashma was wearing the tzitz, even maybe. How they had big dekuna. They had the Shemana Begana for the Kohen Gadol, even the second bias, even if it wasn't doing miraculous stuff, they still had. So the Gemara says that he's wearing all this stuff, and the rabbis made a nasty comment. It basically said, maybe it's good enough for you to be the king, but to be the king, maybe you should let somebody else do it, right? This was a problem with the Chashmonaim. Right, the Ramban says the reason why the Chashmonaim are wiped out is because they did a big avera. Ad kiyav Shila v'lo yikasamim. Yehuda is meant to be the king of Klal Yisrael, not the Kahan. The Chashmonaim, they saved the Jewish people at the time of the Chanukah. Wonderful. So stick to your place. The place was the Beis Hamikdash. Why are you becoming the kings? Some want to say that this is the reason why they were not included in Mishnayos about Chanukah, and we didn't make it, and made it into the Gemara Shabbos Kafal, but didn't make it into Mishnayos because of the fact that it was not appropriate. You usurped the place of the Malachim. You should have stuck within your lane, being a Kohanim. So the Gemara says that they said maybe we should check out your lineage, whatever. There was a suffix. Maybe his mother was a Nishbase, and so he wouldn't be kosher as a Kohen. They looked into it. They couldn't find anything negative. So basically, he remains a Kohen and a Melech. He was very angry at them for casting aspersions on his lineage, and he kills the Talmid Chacham. Shimon Shetach goes and hides. The Gemara says he was raised on by a rabbi, by a Menuvel, whose name was, I think, Yehuda ben Poera. So there the Gemara says that he says to Shimon Shata, to Yanai, you're going to let them cast aspersions on your lineage, and then that's it. It's just chill. So Yanai says, what should I do? She says, kill him. She says, if I kill him, what am I going to do about the Torah? She says, Torah. It's munachas v'karen zavis. Kol haroitz l'ilmod yavei v'yilmod. It's a minute in the corner. Anybody wants to come and learn can come and learn. What are you worried about? You have an art scroll, you know. What's the problem? The Gemara says he goes down and kills all the rabbis. And the Gemara says that was wrong. Yana should have said to him, maybe the Torah Shebachsav, it's true, you could know it, even if it's just in the corner, you could open a book. But Torah Shebachsav, how are you going to know without having the rabbis? That's what he should have said back to him. But anyway, that's the background of the story. I should mention that here the Yerushalmi in Brachos tells us a different version of the story. The Yerushalmi in Brachos says over the Maisa, not in this way. The Yerushalmi says over here that what happened was as that follows. There was 300 Nazirim who came to the Beis Hamikdash, and he found the Pesach for half of them, for 150, that they didn't have to bring karbanos. It's expensive. They had to bring 3 karbanos for a nazir. He sent a message to Yanai and said, I have found 300 Nazirim. They need 900 karbanos. Why don't you sponsor half and I'll sponsor half? Yanai says, no problem. She sent him 450 animals for the karbanos. And the Gemara says that Shimon Shetach used the 450 animals for the 150 Nazirim. And then one of the informers, a Meiser, went to Yana and said, you sponsored it. And he said he was going to do half. He didn't give one carbon from his own. So he got very angry at Shimon Shetach. He says, you liar. He says, I didn't lie. You worked it out with the Torah. With the money, and I worked it out with the Torah. You gave half, and I gave half. My half was that they didn't have to bring karbanos. So I found Pesachs for each neder, and you gave half by giving karbanos. What's the difference? He was very, very angry, and Shimon Shetach had to run away. That's the context of this Gemara. Either way, in both situations, Shimon Shezach is hiding, he's away, and Yanai ends up needing him. And the story is, in this part now joins together as to how Yanai ends up meeting Shimon Shezach. Says the Gemara. Yanai Malka, oh, I should just mention, I had a cute thought. I don't know if it's true. So Yanai says over there in the Gemara in Kedushin, the opening of the Gemara there is that Yanai, when he sat down to eat after his big victory, he says, "Let's eat a bunch of foods that are maliach, very very like salted food." And Rashi tells us over there in Kedushin Samach Vav that the maliach is a yerek, is a vegetable. The shmin is like a vegetable, a very fatty vegetable. I don't know what kind of vegetable. And I was wondering, well, I don't have an answer for Rashi, but do you remember we had a Gemara here on Memdalad? I remember the Gemara Memdalad and Alf. The Gemara said that Yanai Hamelech was had a city, Bihar Hamelech, whatever that meant. Shahayim Maitzim Mimeno Shishim Riboy Safle Taris. The Kurds say to Ain that they would come up with so much of these bowls of sardine, right? And if you look at the Rebbeinu Chanan over there, Rebbeinu Chanan says, "V'hu Maliach." This is this Maliach. Right? Rashi doesn't use the word maliach. Rashi says, "Falam alev chatichas dag chatoch." It was a cut fish, but this is the maliach in the context of that Gemara. Remember, the pears are very sweet. You need to have maliach. It was the one time when he said, "When is the pas not the main thing?" When you have this kind of pears right? So you need to have other things that are going to water it down. So I'm not sure 100% why Rashi there in Kedushin says that the maluchim, the maliach food, is a yerek shaming. Why doesn't he say that? Is this thing from Har Melech that he had these safli tiris, these maliach fish? I don't know. I leave it as a question. In any event, so we have a situation here where Yani Hamelech is sitting with his wife, and they're eating bread. They're eating together. And when he killed the rabbis, he had no one to bench for him. Shows you what a very serious Talmud Chacham was. He didn't have anybody to know how to bench. So he says to his wife, "Who's gonna, be somebody who could bench for us?" So swear to me that if I bring you somebody who's going to be able to bench, you're not going to bug him. So he swore. He swore to her. So she brought her brother. And he sat down between him and her. So like they're probably sitting in their throne room or whatever, they're sitting, and he sits down in the middle. So I'm like, "Chazis kami yikara avidna." So he says, "You see," Yanai says to Shimon Shedach, "You see how nice I treat you? Treating you so beautiful, letting you sit here, mamish, in between the queen and the queen." So I'm like, lav at come. Right, now imagine the context of what I said about Shimon Shedach. Either he ran away because Yanai killed all the Talmid Chacham, or because he had annoyed him about the dharm of these Nazirim. Either way, so Shimon Shedach did not like calm himself down. He's responding right back. So Yanni says, "Look, you see, I did such a nice thing for you. I'm letting you sit in between us, and such a big covet for you." So he says, "Amar le lav at ka moikris li ela oiraisi de moikrli." You're not giving me any honor. It's the Torah that's giving me honor. It's the Torah that's making me sit in this place, not you. Because the pasuk says, "Sal salos mecca," right? Hug it, and it will lift you up. Techabercha, right? Honor it, kisechabkena, right? Techabercha, it will honor you, kisechabkena, if you hug it. In other words, if you hug the Torah, it'll give you covet. And what have I done in my life? Says Shemar Shedach. I'm hugging the Torah. I learn it all the time. So therefore, I have the covet of being able to be sitting here in the throne room and getting a big covet. Now, we have to just do this side topic because it's fun. This has engineered a whole little discussion because of the following. Look at Rashi. Rashi says, "Saslo Sarim Mecca." Rashi says, "Sefer Dekra Techabedcha Kisechabekena." The end of the pasuk is, and when it will honor you if you hug it. So in other words, as the Mashal says already, you got to take out the end of the pasuk in the Gemara. I don't know if your Gemaras have it, but you should basically have a parenthesis around sechabercha ki sechabikenu, because if it was in the Gemara, the Rashi wouldn't have said that's the end of the pasuk. Clearly, it was not in Rashi's Gemara, and that's why he's bringing it down for you. So that's number one. Number two, This has a couple of layers. Number one, there's a thesis in Bava Kama. The Gemara says about something that we have it's repeated throughout Tanakh. Mefresh B'Torah, right? It says it the second time in Nevi'im. U'Meshulish B'Ksuvim. And the third time it says it in Ksuvim. And the Gemara there brings down a riot. What's the third time it says it in Ksuvim? It brings down a pasuk from Ben Sira. Everyone knows in English, Koheles is called Ecclesiastes. And then there's something called Ben Sira, which in English is called Ecclesiasticus. Koheles, a very fascinating book, which seems very, very at odds with Yiddishkeit. Basically, that's what Chazal said. If not for the end of it, which says, Seif Davar. At the end of it, it's a Lakim Yira, it's Mitzvot of Shemar. If not for that, we wouldn't be able to include it in our canon. It's such a complicated book. But not Ben Sira. Ben Sira, every page you have to learn and daven, and mamish, But that's not a part of the canon. Why? Different reasons given, not important for now. For our purposes now, is Meshulish B'Ksuvim, the passage that the Gemara in Bava Kama is bringing down in Pei Beis is from Ben Sira. Says Taisvis, Meshulish B'Ksuvim over there, it says Taisvis, it's not a problem. Sometimes we bring down psukim from Ben Sira as though it's a regular pasuk. In fact, the Gemara in another place says Dichsev, and it uses a pasuk from Ben Sira. Here it says Meshulish B'Ksuvim, and it's a pasuk from Ben Sira. And what's the example of Taisvis in Bava Kama on Pei Beis, and Bava Kama on Sadi Beis, and in Erevin on Samachay? The pasuk that Taisvis brings down in both places, that is from Ben Sira, is Sasala Sarayim Mecca. Our Gemara right here, bringing down a pasuk from where? Mishlei. This already bothered people in the times of the Gaonim. We have chuvas of the Gaonim about this. Like, what are they? Where is this Sasala Sarayim Mecca? What does it mean? Ben Sira according to Psukim. There's a pasuk in Mishlei. So the first thing that it tells us is that Taisvis didn't know that this pasuk was in Mishlei. Maybe Taisvis thought it was in Ben Sira. Why did Taisvis think that? You know why? Because of the Yerushalmi. That Yerushalmi that I was telling you about Yanai. If you look at the Yerushalmi says the pasuk is as it says, and it puts it into Shimon Meshetach's mouth. Shimon Meshetach saying to Yana, "You're not honoring me. The Torah honors me because it says in Ben Sira, Sasula Sarayim Mecca, that if you hug it, it will give you covet." So it's the Yerushalmi. Taisus is quoting the Yerushalmi. You see, the Yerushalmi has a different ending in the pasuk than the one we have here. And I haven't looked at Ben Sira, but I'm imagining that what happened is that in Ben Sira, there's a pasuk of Sasalo Sarayim Mecca, and it has a different ending. But the ending that we have here is an ending from Mishlei. But if you just said Sasalo Sarayim Mecca alone, that could be from Ben Sira. If you have the way it ends being differently with the way the Yerushalmi has it. And that, I think, perhaps can explain. Otherwise, it would be basically being forced to say that the Balei Tosfos never looked at Mishlei and didn't know the pasuk. Okay. But it's on me. I have to look at a copy of Ben Sira and see what we can find. So, Mirch, if I have some time, or if anyone else has time, please let me know. All right, so continues the Gemara. So now he's sitting down there with them. He says, you see, he's not accepting sort of like responsibility. What do you mean he's not accepting responsibility? I'm not sure 100% what that means. What's the context here? Which version are we talking about? The situation of where he killed all Chachamim because they cast aspersions about his lineage, or the fact that he had to run away because he had been mafer neder and didn't give actually karbanos from his own? Not 100% sure what this is sort of referring to. In any event, Yavle Kasa Lebruche. They gave him a cup to make a bracha, to make a bracha samaz, to lead them in Zimun. Amalei Hechi Avrich. Baruch She'achli Yana v'chaver mishalai. Should I say that Yana and his married band of men that they ate? No, he's being sarcastic. He's saying, "You want me to make a Zimun for you? I didn't eat. You ate. I didn't eat." They just gave him a seat. They didn't give any food. So what do? Still lahu kasa. They gave him something to drink. Yavle kasa achrina, and they gave him another drink. Uvarach, and then he was making a bracha. So why is all this relevant? He didn't eat after washing. He didn't have a mitzi. He benched for them, but he didn't what? He didn't eat the regular meal. He had drinks of wine. Number one. Number two, do you remember we already said that if you say before, right, if somebody wants to join the meal, right, and we haven't yet said Rabbi Isai, he's able to join, right? But once Rabbi Isai will mention, Taisa pointed out that it's not just Rabbi Isai, right? Right, Taisa pointed out that Amem Zayin Amanal, Taisa different Masal Ilu. Remember, Taisa said that even if you don't say Rabbi Isai Mavel mention, even if you just already um, um, right. Aval Amar Taisa said, Amar Havlan v'Navar she'esichu daita melechel en shlishim mitzvah b'imam. Once you said Havlan and Varch, once you say Rabbi Samuel mentioned, that's already the end of the meal. In this situation, they're calling him into bench. Isn't that similar? So they didn't technically say Havlan v'Navar v'Varch, right? How could he bench if, by definition, they're calling him into bench, meant that they were already finished the meal? So I'm not 100% clear. I didn't see anybody ask the question, but that would be one aspect of the Gemara to discuss. And then the Gemara discusses a different aspect. The Gemara says that maybe you want to bring a raya from here, that even without washing, it's nevertheless sufficient to be able to bench. And in this case, not to only to be inspired from the benching, to lead the benching. Says the Gemara, it's not true. Amar of Abba Breder of Chibar Abba. Shimon Shetach da'ava le'garmeu da'ava. Shimon Shetach did his own thing, but he was not going in accordance with the halacha. Because we have a memo from Rabbi Yochanan that says, that you're not able to be mitzi the rabbin with your chiyuv of benching until you yourself eat a kazayas. In other words, you can be mitzaref, right? Our Gemara before we talked about being mitzaref, but there's a difference between siruf and being mitzi others in the benching. To be mitzi others, you actually have to eat yourself a kazayas. You actually have to eat something. It's not enough to just come along and eat a yerek. Obviously, you can't be mitzi or to have some wine. That's not enough. Where Shimon Shetach here was doing his own thing. Now maybe he felt those sakana, right? Shimon Shetach, he already had a run-in with Yanai before, so maybe he didn't want to take any more risk. But as a normative halacha, just to drink or to eat, to be starved, that's fine, but not to be mitzi others. Says the Gemara, Meisvei, all of the Hesav. What happens if somebody comes and joins the group? I feel like Tarval, even if he didn't actually dip bread with them, in other words, he didn't really eat. Elabatzer, right? He just put something in brine. So you see that even if he eats just one fig or he dips something in the brine, that's enough. So you see, you don't really need to eat in order to have the benching. Says, well, no. What's your question, Shimon Gamliel? You're asking from this brisa that says even if you didn't do tibul imam, even though you didn't dip the bread, you're still able to be included with them. It's tarufim and starif. We're not talking about siruf here. Of course, we agree that for siruf, it's enough to have a fig. It's enough to dip something in the brine or to even make a hagaf, whatever it is. That's fine. But in order to be mitzi the rabbim in their chayva, then you have to have at least a kazayas of dagon in order to be able to lead the benching. Okay, so we have to quickly do a couple of things. Maybe what we do first is the Taisus. Taisus Tisha she'achlu dagon echad yerek mitzdarfen. So Taisus says that the halacha is right? That if one person just had vegetables or he had some wine, he's able to be mitzdaref in the benching. Even if it's just drinking, that's okay, right? Even though you say, right, this person didn't eat, he drank. Drinking is b'chlal eating, so it's fine. However, this Gemara, right? What are we talking about? We talked about 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. We didn't talk about three. What happens if you have two people who ate, and there's a third person who didn't eat wash? He didn't like. He just had a vegetable. He just had some wine, whatever. Can you do it? Does the same law that applies by 10, does it apply by three or not? So the first version of Taitzis is V'yesh Roitzim Lem Dahanu Dafkel Zimun Asara. Maybe this only applies to 10. Aval Shlosh Loy Mitzdarfe. Maybe by three we're going to be more machmir. The Harei Lael, because in yesterday's Gemara Nami machmir on Tzvei B'tzir Shloshim Asar. Yesterday we're also more machmir on 3 versus 10. So maybe we should do the same over here. Nevertheless, Taisa says, "Amiyu b'Yushalmi tani shnaim shachul pasuk achad yerek mezamnin v'chein pasuk re b'tais v'isay." Right, the Taisus of the re pasuk that even by 3 it's okay. The same way by 10. In other words, if you had two people who washed, one person who had a vegetable or drank wine, you would still be able to starve. Right, that's why if you notice, you sometimes see somebody who says, "Oh, I didn't wash," and nevertheless they include him in the zimun. Now, lahalacha. If you look in Archaim in Kuf Tzadi Zayin, the what do you call it? The way it's brought down is like this. The Shulchan Aruch says that by 10 he quotes our Gemara, so 7, 8, 9, 10 is able to starve somebody who didn't eat hamaitzi. He just had the Yerokis, wine, whatever. That can be included. But by 3, the sheet is I didn't discuss here yet, but we don't have time. But the Sami Kotzi disagrees with the read. He says you can't rely on this Yerushalmi. In other words, by 3 it doesn't work. It only works by 10. So Tais brings down. So the Mechaber brings down that by 3 there's a machlekes. There are those who say 3 it works, those who say 3 it doesn't work. Therefore, ideally by 3 you should not allow them to be a part of it. You make them eat. It's only, he says, if somebody refuses to eat, like to wash, I'm sorry, if somebody refuses to wash and they just ate, that like sort of b'di'evet, that we'll be able to rely on them and include them in the zima. But ideally, we want them to wash in order to avoid this machlokes that you see here in Taisus. The Taisus, on the one hand, the Re says that by 3 it applies, the same it applies by 10. And the Sami Kaitzi, who disagrees, who says it only applies by 10, but more macham by 3, and the Rishalmi that seems to suggest that by 3 it's okay, is not relevant. Okay, that's one. 2. So the Gemara said that in order to be mitzvah the Rami Dei Chayvas, there's a difference between that and tziruf. For tziruf, it's not a problem, but to be mitzvah, you have to wash and have exayas. Says Rashi, not typical Rashi to find like this. This is a very not typical Rashi. Look at the bottom Rashi. The Rashi tells us that a kazai is afagav the kazai is dog and shir d'rabbanan. What do you mean mitzvah Rami Dei Chayvas? When you eat a kazayas, are you chayav to bench me daraisa? But when does the chiv daraisa to bench? V'chalta, v'savato v'rachta. You eat a kazayas, midrabanan you're chayav to bench, but midaraisa you're supposed to eat kadei severe. Supposed to eat something in a normal amount. Just to eat a tiny kazayas, now you're chayav in benching. We happen to say back in the Gemara told us earlier on Chafam and Beis. What a wonderful thing that the Jewish people do. Remember, the Gemara ended off right before the Mishnah, and there on Chafam and Beis. Remember, the Gemara said that it was a wonderful thing that the Jewish people do. Hashem says, should I not lift my face? In other words, anthropomorphic. Should I not be nice to the Jews? Why? The pasuk says, "V'chalda savata ve'raktas Hashem lekecha v'heim medakt gimal atzma at kezayis." They're machmir to bench even on the kezayis. They're not machmir midaraisa. They're machmir nonetheless. So Rashi asks, I understand that we're machmir on ourselves to bench, but fragt Rashi, how could you be mitzi others today who have a chiyav daraisa to bench? If you yourself only had a kazayis, so your chiyav to bench is only midirabanan, how are you able to mechayev everybody else at the meal who had a regular meal? They have a chiyav to bench midaraisa. Good question. That's Rashi's question. Ibn Taimar says Rashi. So let's just finish. So Rashi says, "Miu came in the mechayim dirabanan muchim davar karina be much ram dechavasan." So Rashi gives us an answer. Rashi's answer is that we can, when somebody has a chiyav dirabanan, he's called somebody who's mechuyev, and therefore is able to be mitzvah the rami their chayva, even if they have a chiyav that's daraisa. That's Rashi's answer. Fragt Rashi, v'im time if my principle is correct, We didn't even get to Mem Ches Mem Beis. We mamash have to hurry. So Rashi asks a question. If what you're saying is, if what I'm saying here is correct, that a bechon shegil chinuch, the a katan who got to age of chinuch, why can't he be mitzi others? Right? The Gemara says tavi me'era. It's a terrible curse. Somebody whose son is mitzi and benching. That could be Rashi. That to me I can answer easy, but the question is, how about a katan? He only has a chiyuv midrabanan to bet. Can he be mitzi others who have a chiyuv daraisa? Why not? If we're saying that once you have a chiyuv midrabanan, then you're able to be mitzi others because you're called a mechuyev, and if you can be mitzi ramidei chayvasan, then why not a katan? Says Rashi Yisoid, or Yisoid in Hilchas Chinuch. Says Rashi, the father is mechuyev in that katan to be mechanech him to he should bench. But the katan is not called a mechuyev. The katan's benching that we're doing al zidei chinuch is a chiyuv on the father. That's not the katan's chiyuv. The katan has himself. Katan qua katan has no chiyuv on himself. Therefore, says Rashi, that's not a question. Taisa disagrees. We don't have time right now. One last point is the Bahag brings down. The Bahag says that somebody who ate it, Rashi brings it down here. Taisa also. The halakas gedolos pasuk dafka de achalnu inu kizayis kebeya. The Kavasei, the Bahag says no. In fact, it doesn't work. Not like what Rashi says. The Bahag paskins that in fact, if you only ate a kizayis or a kebeya, you can only be mitzi others who ate a kizayis or kebeya. If they ate daraisas kidei sevia, you can't be mitzi them. That's what the Bahag says. Taisus disagrees vehemently. Taisus says no. That can't be right because we say Kol Yisrael Avim Zelazeh, and we know that when it comes to Kiddush and it comes to Sheif and it comes to Mendel, you can already be Mitzvah, you can still be Mitzvah others in your Chayv. You have no Chiyuv at all. Christ disagrees with the Bahag. And we don't pass like the Bahag. Okay. Nevertheless, of course, it's ideal, as the Gemara it says, that in order to be a Mitzvah Ram Dechevasan, it's not like the situation of Yanai, you really have to eat Exayis Dog. Now we have to hurry up. Says the Gemara, Itmar Nami. Amar Achana Bar Yehuda Mishmei Rav. What did he say? Afilu loy tarval imam. Turn the page on the B'chesam base. Even if somebody didn't dip with them, ela butzer, right? You only had a little bit in the pickled bread, but it didn't wash. Well, you often imam el gargar sa'achas. You only had what a fig. Mitzdarf, he's able to mitzdarf. But lohaitzi esaram dechay butzer. Many mitzvah achi yoichal kizayis. But he can't be mitzvah the ram in the chayv until imam she eats kizayis himself. Amar Achana Bar Yehuda Mishmei Rava. Here's the basic halacha. Achal ala yerek. If somebody had a lettuce, a vegetable, it's just a kosher yain. Mitzdarf lahaitzi. He's able to mitzdarf, no problem, right? But lahaitzi, in order to be mamish mitzi them, nazim lahaitzi ain mitzi achi yachim kazayis dog. He's not able to mitzi them until he has a kazayis. This is the basic halacha. Okay, Amar Rav Nachman. Moshe tikkun shor berachas hazon. Moshe Rabbeinu was metaken in the bracha of hazon. Mishor shiyor lehaman. When the man came down, Yeshua tikkun lehem berachas haaretz. Yeshua did the bracha of neidlocha when it came to shenichas ularetz, when they got into Eretz Yisrael. David Shlomo tikkun the bnei Shloim. They were metaken Rachem. David tikkun Yisrael Hamelach Shloim berachas Yom Shach Vaydecha. That's David Hamelach. Shlomo tikkun al bayis haggadah hakadosh, and Shlomo Hamelach was metaken on the bayis because he was the one who actually built the bayis. Says the Gemara, Teva Meita b'Yavne tiknu. Teva Meita was metaken in Yavne, right? Connected Haruge Beta because of the Haruge Beta. The Amar of Masna, I say Yom Sheninu Haruge Beta Likvura, that day that the Haruge Beta were able to be buried. Tiknu b'Yavne Teva Meita. They were metaken then Teva Meita. Teva Shlei Hisricha Meita Sheninu Likvura. Teva that they were buried intact, that they didn't all those 7 years or whatever they weren't disintegrated, and I made it that they were eventually allowed to actually be buried. Tanur Rabbanan say the brachas hamazon kach. What does it say the brachas hamazon? Bracha Rishona brachas hazon. Right? We know the first bracha is hazon as la'ilam. Shnia brachas haaretz. Naidul chal. Shlishis b'nei Yerushalayim. The third bracha is rachem. Revi'es hateva meitif. U'bu Shabbos. What about on Shabbos? Maschil b'nechama u'masayim b'nechama. You start out with nechama and you end with nechama. Nechama is considered rachem no. Rachem no and b'nei Yerushalayim kodesh me'er b'yameinu. That's called nechama. The Omer Kedushas Hayom be'emtza. And what's the difference about Shabbos that you mentioned something about Kedushas Hayom? Ritzei, that is put into the middle. That's put into the middle of Rachim. That's how we do it today. If you want to say Ritzei during Rachim, no problem. The Berachas Haaretz, You want to say it in Berachas Haaretz? You want to say it in Nigel? No problem. Brachot Shting L'cham B'Yavneh. If you want to say it in Atayv Meitiv, you can mention it, say wherever you want. The Chacham says you can only mention it in the Chacham. You can only say it in Rachim. Says the Gemara, Chacham, Hainu Tanakam. What's the difference between Tanakam and the Chacham? They both say you have to say it in Rachim. And says the Gemara, you can add the Eved. The Nafkamina is if you do it with the Eved or not. If you did it in another place or not, what would the halacha be? That the Tanakama says that the Tanakhama says that it's okay, b'diavad, and the Rabbanan said you have to go back to wherever it is. She just mentioned that that Taisus here in the Taisus of Masl, we don't have a chance to go through it in detail, but Taisus over here says that there are those who change the girsa and what do you call it? And instead of saying Rachem, they say Nachmenu on Shabbos. Why? Because they don't want to ask for things on Shabbos, because you're not supposed to be asking on Shabbos for things. Taisus says the minik shtutz, and you don't have to be makbid on this at all. The minik shtus and that's Taisus' last line. The minik shtusu hamashana bracha shalcha. It's a minik shtus, those who change the benching in order to account. And if you notice, for example, Rosh Chodesh benching, right? By Rosh Chodesh benching, we say Rosh Chodesh should be a shana taiva and some b'mana sachan kolon, and you say mishaberach for refuahs on Shabbos. It's not considered a problem. Not to change, to ask for something different, no. But in Avarachim we have, so whatever is already the matbeh of tefillah that we take, we don't ask for new things. All right, we'll stop here.